And then why do we call bats vampire bats? Did we initially think at one point in time they were sucking blood?
There are some vampire bats. They're found only in Latin America now.
Oh, so they're real.
Yeah. We were just looking at a vampire bat a moment ago.
Okay, so these guys with the teeth.
That's a real vampire bat.
And so they actually bite animals and suck their blood?
Lap their blood.
What is this that we're looking at?
That's the kind of special tongue that a vampire bat has for
Oh,
that.
whoa.
Now, before you get too put off by vampire bats,
I'm not put off. I'm excited.
Let me point out that these are really sophisticated animals that in every way. They're the ones that were first found to have altruistic relationships with friends and help them and even feed them in times of need. They adopt orphans. These are animals that they're always they're almost. Now, you didn't get this from my website.
No.
This is YouTube.
If you went to my website, one of the cutest pictures on my website, one that I get a big kick out of showing people, because when I show it to them, their reaction is, "Oh my God, isn't he cute?" And it's a vampire. It depends on how you show these bats. They're right there at the bottom. That's a vampire.
It was.
Oh, wait, not that.
This photo.
That one. That's a vampire.
He's very cute.
And it's just how you show these animals.
Well, you're very defensive because I don't have a problem with them being vampires.
Well, I don't have a problem with now the first one you're looking at that was lapping blood.
Yes,
that was Desmodus rotundus.
It's fascinating. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's really interesting.
It's the kind of vampire that causes most of the trouble. It gets vampires in trouble in Latin America. They're a problem because we came in and cut down the rainforest and brought in cattle, and they overpopulated because they had an easy food supply.
Okay, so that's what they're causing trouble down in Latin America, is just because there's so many of them?
They're overpopulated because we screwed up the habitat and brought in easy food.
Well, not you and I. Someone else did it.
Well, we kind of do it because we buy the beef from Latin America. That it's a roundabout chain.
So these bats that prey on the cattle, do they carry diseases? Or are they a problem in some way?
Not commonly. You can get rabies from a vampire bat. You can get rabies from any mammal, but rabies has been vastly exaggerated in bats. For example, here in the United States, there was a time when people thought that all bats, or most of them, were rabid, but in fact, put this in perspective, only 1 or 2 people in a year in all of the U.S. and Canada combined die of rabies from a bat. And those people die because they picked up a sick one, got bit in self-defense, and didn't use good sense and go get checked out. And there's a vaccination you can take that would be 100% effective.
I read a story about a guy who was outside of a cave and bats flew by and scratched him. And then he wound up getting rabies from that.
Sounds like a bit of an exaggeration and maybe taken a bit out of context.
Oh, yeah? I heard he died.
Well, if you get rabies, you're going to die, but or most of the time you will. But take me, for example. I've been studying bats for over 60 years worldwide. I've studied bats in 45 countries, photographed hundreds of species, handled them, spent countless hours with millions in caves, and I have never, ever been attacked by a bat. I have only been bitten when I was handling one and he bit in self-defense.
Did you ever see a rabid bat?
Yes.
How would you be able to discern whether a bat is rabid in the wild?
I probably couldn't. It would be a good guess, but I'm sure that I have seen a rabid bat. They're not a whole lot with rabies. When you sample wild populations, actually, one of the things that bats get a bad name for is it's much easier to catch a sick bat than a healthy bat. So when they go out and catch bats and they say, well, up to 0.5% are rabid, what that's like is if you go to the waiting room of a cancer specialist doctor and you examine the people there, you're going to get a bit higher frequency of cancer than you would from the base population. We don't really know how many have rabies, but what we can tell you is it's very few. And you can forget disease from bats just about entirely if you just don't go around picking up. You know, if you find a bat where you can handle it in the daytime, it's probably a sick bat.
Yeah.
Don't handle it. You leave it alone. You got no problem. They don't attack people.
Well, you probably shouldn't be out there handling bats anyway, unless you're a bat scientist.
Well, you
right?
shouldn't handle unfamiliar animals. Let me point out that while we make a big deal out of the 1 or 2 people in a year that die of rabies from a bat bite in the U.S. and Canada combined, in the U.S. alone, we lose between 40 and 50 people a year from dog attacks. But before we go on a rampage to rid dogs from our neighborhoods, we might consider how hypocritical that would be in a country where our spouses kill us off by the thousands. So the moral of the story is if you're brave enough to own a dog and get married, you certainly ought to be brave enough to handle having a few bats in your neighborhood.
That's a good point. It's all about numbers, right?
Yeah.
So these vampire bats, do any of them prey on humans? Do any of them try to bite humans and drink the blood of humans?
The common vampire Desmodus rotundus will bite humans, but the humans have to be doing something foolish. I mean,
it's not like if you're camping and you just like take a nap in a hammock and a vampire bat comes and bites you.
Well, I would certainly. I've slept plenty of night in a hammock in the rainforest, but never without a mosquito net over me. There are a whole lot of things that can bite you besides vampire bats, and it's just foolish to be sleeping out in the open in a South American rainforest.
And that's where most of the vampire bats are?
They're all limited to Latin America.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of vampire bats being in Romania, like where Dracula lived.
The original vampire stories came from tales about horrible behavior in humans.
Like Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah.
Yeah. But bats, how did they get connected to bats? Do you know the story of the origins of the lore?
Apparently vampire bats weren't discovered until, I think it was Columbus when he first came to America, and they heard about bats biting people, but long before that, the vampire stories and myths had evolved based on human behavior.
And so that's just something that just got spread and turned into this lore, and they don't even exist in the place where they were supposedly like.
Yeah, even in
vampires.
Latin America, vampires are a small proportion of the species present.
Interesting.
It's caught in the crossfire.